To ignore reality is not to deny what stands before your senses, but to elevate yourself beyond it. To live from the inner world where truth already exists in its completed form. For reality, as the world calls it, is nothing more than yesterday's imagination crystallized into form. And when you dare to loosen your hold on appearances, when you refuse to bow before the facts and conditions that seem immovable, you slip into the higher truth, where your assumption has already been fulfilled. It is here, in this silent sanctuary of imagination, that you become untouchable, magnetic, radiant, because you are no longer chained to the shadows cast upon the wall. You are the one casting them. The moment you turn inward and live as though your desire is already yours, you create a current so powerful that those outside, those you thought you needed to chase, now feel the void you have created by withdrawing your attention. They begin to hunger for you, to thirst for you, because your silence speaks louder than their noise, and your absence echoes with more power than any attempt to explain, to beg, or to demand. To ignore reality is to understand that reality is delayed. It is sluggish compared to imagination, and so you stop consulting it for answers. You stop looking at it for validation. You stop trying to convince it of anything. You allow the world to be as it is, and you go about your inner work with conviction. In that inner work, you craft scenes where you are adored, remembered, longed for. You walk in that vision as if it were the only truth, and as you persist, the outer world bends, situations reorganize, hearts turn, minds soften, doors open, not because you fought with appearances, but because you ignored them. And the more you ignore them, the more the world of shadow scrambles to catch up with the light of your inner certainty. People are addicted to attention, but they are starved for energy. When you withhold the frantic energy of chasing, when you refuse to give reality the fuel of your desperation, you become mysterious. Your presence, even in silence, becomes intoxicating. They feel it. They may not be able to articulate it, but they feel it in their chest, in the restless moments of the night when your name swims through their mind uninvited. They wonder where you have gone, what you are doing, why they suddenly feel incomplete without you. And it is not because you sent them a message or posted something for them to see. It is because you pulled your energy inward and chose to dwell in imagination rather than in appearances. That act alone ignites telepathic ripples. It plants seeds in the subconscious of others. And those seeds grow into longing, into remembrance, into the feeling of missing you so profoundly that they are compelled to reach for you. From here, independence is built. Until then, everyone, look on. You must see the irony here. The less you try, the more they chase. The less you seek proof, the more proof floods your life. The less you explain yourself, the more they strain to understand you. Reality is reactive. It is not the initiator. Your assumption is the cause, your imagination is the source, and your silence is the stage upon which reality scrambles to perform. So when you ignore reality, you are not being careless. You are being wise. You are refusing to worship the effect, and instead, you rest in the cause. The cause is invisible. The cause is thought. The cause is feeling. And as you cultivate the feeling of already being wanted, already being chosen, already being loved, the world outside must eventually reflect it. And those who once overlooked you, who once dismissed you, will suddenly find themselves haunted by your presence and absence. They will miss you more deeply than you can imagine, because your withdrawal created a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. That vacuum draws them in. Think of the countless times you have chased, begged, explained, or argued. Did it ever bring lasting satisfaction? Did it not always end in exhaustion, in resentment, in deeper longing? That is because you were pouring energy into the effect, trying to rearrange shadows. But the moment you learn to ignore, The moment you turned your back on the shadows and faced the light within, everything changed. Suddenly, without effort, without confrontation, the shadows rearranged themselves. They began to take the form of the images you held within. This is the true alchemy. Silence, imagination, persistence. It is not loud, it is not frantic, it is not desperate. It is calm, steady, confident. And in that confidence, you become irresistible. The more you ignore reality, the more they miss you. Because missing is nothing more than the echo of energy withdrawn. When you were pouring energy outward, they were full, they were satisfied, even bored. They had you without effort, so they did not value you. But when you turned inward, when you stopped giving reality your attention, they felt the emptiness, they felt the shift, and they began to crave what once they took for granted. This is not manipulation, this is law. Energy cannot be destroyed, only redirected. And when you redirect it inward into the assumption of your desire fulfilled, it radiates with a magnetic power that no one can resist. Do you not see how this applies to every sphere of life? Not just relationships, but money, success, health, opportunity. When you ignore the apparent lack, when you stop consulting the bank account, when you stop checking the mirror for signs of change, when you stop begging the world to give you evidence, you slip into the truth of having, of being, of already possessing. And in that state, everything that once seemed distant comes rushing to you. Lack cannot hold its form when you refuse to acknowledge it. Limitation cannot stand when you refuse to bow to it. And those who once overlooked you cannot remain indifferent when you have withdrawn your energy and redirected it into the conviction of being desired. There is a telepathic network that binds us all. Every thought, every feeling is transmitted silently, constantly beyond words. When you dwell in longing, in begging, in sadness, others feel it as weight, as burden, as resistance. They pull away, not knowing why, only feeling the heaviness of your vibration. But when you withdraw and dwell instead in fulfillment, in joy, in silent confidence, they feel it as magnetism. They feel drawn, enchanted, captivated, even when you say nothing, even when you do nothing. They feel compelled to think of you, to miss you, to reach for you. And all of this happens without your effort, without your chasing, without your desperate need for evidence. This is why ignoring reality is so powerful. Reality is not the authority. Reality is the echo. You must stop trying to converse with the echo and instead speak to the source. The source is imagination. The source is your inner conviction. And the more you dwell in that inner state, the less the outer world matters. Until suddenly it begins to conform, not because you fought it, but because you ignored it. And in that ignoring, in that detachment, you became untouchable, irresistible, unforgettable. So tonight, as you lie in bed, do not replay the facts of the day. Do not consult the silence of the phone, the absence of the message, the coldness of appearances. Instead, dwell in the unseen conversation. Hear their voice telling you how much they miss you. Feel their arms wrapping around you. Imagine their eyes searching for you. Let it be so vivid, so real, that you fall asleep in that embrace. And as you do, you impress upon the deep mind the truth of your desire already fulfilled. That impression sets the telepathic current into motion. And soon, in ways you cannot predict, they will find themselves reaching for you, missing you, longing for you, compelled to act in alignment with the state you assume. Ignore the outer, live from the inner. Withdraw the frantic energy of need, pour it instead into the calm energy of fulfillment, and watch as the world, as people, as circumstances bend themselves to fill the vacuum you created. The more you ignore reality, the more they miss you, because the more you live in truth, the more the echo must follow. This is the law. This is the secret. This is the power you hold. When you allow yourself to ignore the nagging reminders of what is not yet visible, you release the grip that binds you to the cycle of repetition. For as long as you worship appearances, you repeat them. As long as you talk about them, focus on them, argue with them, you perpetuate them. But the moment you withdraw your gaze, the moment you say within yourself, this is not the truth of me, you break the chain. You elevate yourself above the loop. You stand in the realm where everything is already yours. And from that realm, you look back at the so-called reality and laugh, because you realize it was only ever clay in your hands, waiting for your molding. It is not what the world shows you that matters. It is what you choose to show the world through the energy of your imagination. Think of those who suddenly find themselves tormented with thoughts of you, missing you, when they once took you for granted. Did you do anything outwardly to trigger that? No. You simply stopped feeding the outer world your attention. You stopped begging reality for scraps of proof. You closed the door on appearances and opened the door to imagination. And in that space you built a new identity, one who is wanted, one who is remembered, one who is cherished. You lived from it, silently, and that silence became louder than words. They began to hear you in their dreams, to feel you in their quiet moments, to sense your absence like a missing limb. That is the magnetism of one who ignores reality and rests in fulfillment. It is in the unseen where true communication takes place. You may think communication requires words, but the deeper communication is telepathic. Thoughts are seeds, feelings are currents, and every person is tuned to them whether they are aware of it or not. So when you ignore reality and instead dwell in the scene of being missed, of being adored, of being pursued, you are planting thoughts in their mind without effort. You are sending currents through the invisible network that compel them to respond. They may think the longing is theirs, that the thought originated within them, but in truth it was born from your inner conviction. This is why your silence is louder than your words, because silence, charged with imagination, transmits more powerfully than words spoken in desperation. The outer world cannot resist the pull of the inner. You do not have to lift a finger to make it happen. You do not have to explain yourself or defend your worth. You simply have to withdraw from the temptation of reality's tricks, to ignore the appearances that scream lack and separation, and to stand instead in the knowing that what you want is already yours. In that knowing, in that unwavering inner vision, the outer is forced to conform. Those who ignored you will now feel compelled to see you. Those who dismissed you will find themselves haunted by your image. Those who once overlooked you will wake in the night with your name on their lips, unsure why the thought of you has become so irresistible. It is because you no longer gave them your energy outwardly, you gave it inwardly. And that inner energy became a gravitational force. So powerful is this force that it applies to everything. When you ignore the evidence of illness and instead dwell in health, your body begins to shift, responding to the vibration of wellness. When you ignore the lack of money and dwell in abundance, opportunities arise, channels open, unexpected windfalls appear, because the outer is only ever a mirror of the inner. And when you ignore the absence of love and instead dwell in being loved, the beloved feels it. They sense it. They miss you. They seek you out, not because you demanded it of them, but because you created it within. You must learn to play this game with conviction, for reality will tempt you. It will whisper that nothing is changing, that they do not care, that your bank account is empty, that your body is failing. And if you listen, if you bow before these appearances, you fall back into the cycle. But if you ignore it, if you treat it as you would the ramblings of a liar, you will see the power of ignorance. You are not denying that appearances exist. You are denying their authority over you. You are declaring that imagination is the only truth, and that truth must clothe itself in fact. And the longer you persist in this inner knowing, the more reality cracks, bends, shifts, and eventually conforms to the mold you have impressed upon it. The beauty of ignoring reality is that it creates mystery. People are addicted to knowing what you are doing, how you feel, where your attention is. And when you no longer feed them with outward demonstrations, they are left in the dark. They begin to wonder, to imagine, to crave. They replay old conversations, they revisit old moments, they search for clues in your absence, they cannot escape it. Because energy once given freely is now withheld, and the hunger grows. The silence eats at them, the absence becomes unbearable. And all the while, you are not suffering, you are not longing, you are not chasing, you are fulfilled within. You are living as if the desire is already yours, and in that fulfillment, you radiate an energy they cannot ignore. This is the irony of desire. When you chase, it flees. When you ignore appearances and rest in having, it comes. When you need, you repel. When you are fulfilled, you attract. So you must train yourself to ignore, not with bitterness, not with resentment, but with serene confidence. You ignore because you know the outer is already old news, because you know the inner is the source, because you know the world has no choice but to follow your assumption. And the more you live in that truth, the more they miss you, the more they long for you, the more they are drawn into your orbit. Every thought you persist in is a seed planted in the subconscious soil of the universe. When you persist in the thought of being wanted, being adored, being missed, that seed grows and blossoms, and others are compelled to act in ways that reflect it. They may not understand why, but they will feel restless without you. They will feel incomplete without your presence. They will feel the undeniable pull toward you, and you will stand silently in your conviction, knowing you never had to chase, never had to beg, never had to plead. You only had to ignore the false evidence of the outer world and live in the truth of the inner. This is why those who practice this art appear to others as if they have some invisible charm. People call it charisma, magnetism, mystery, but it is simply the refusal to bow before appearances. It is the choice to live in imagination rather than in fact. It is the mastery of silence, the mastery of ignoring, the mastery of assumption. And in this mastery you find freedom, no longer enslaved to the conditions of the world, no longer desperate for another's validation, no longer chained to appearances. You walk in fulfillment. And in that fulfillment, the world must rearrange itself, and people must respond, and reality must echo your inner conviction. So I tell you again, the more you ignore reality, the more they miss you. For what you ignore outwardly, you fulfill inwardly. And what you fulfill inwardly must manifest outwardly, in the longing eyes, in the reaching hand, in the whispered words of those who suddenly realize they cannot live without you. And you will know that it was never them you needed to convince, never the world you needed to beg, but only yourself you needed to believe. The silence you cultivate when you ignore reality is not empty, it is filled with power. It is not a void to be feared, but a womb where new realities gestate. When you cease reacting, when you stop pouring your energy into what already exists, you create a sacred space within. And in that space, your imagination speaks, your vision grows, your conviction strengthens. That is why the world begins to miss you. Their minds sense the shift, they feel the absence of your outward energy, and in that vacuum, they are drawn back toward you with irresistible force. Consider this. Every interaction you have ever had with another person is impressed upon their subconscious. Your laughter, your presence, your words, all of these are etched into the fabric of their memory. When you withdraw, when you ignore appearances and instead live inwardly in fulfillment, those impressions awaken within them. They replay the sweetness of your presence, the warmth of your energy, the uniqueness of your essence. And the more you ignore reality, the stronger those echoes become, until they swell into longing. This is not imagination alone. It is law. What you no longer give outwardly, you give inwardly. And the inner always overpowers the outer. This is why ignoring reality is an act of supreme confidence. Most people panic when appearances contradict their desires. They scramble to fix, to explain, to prove. But the wise one understands that reality is only an echo, a shadow, an effect. The wise one smiles at appearances, knowing they have no authority. The wise one ignores the world's noise and